ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Destruction and Renewal, a visual history of the Jews and Jerusalem. Tonight, the introduction comes from Rabbi Mordechai Wollenberg.
Hi, Rabbi Ali. Thank you very much for that. I'm sitting in my car, parked up, not moving. The wonders of technology. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. A big thanks to you for all that you've done to organize these events, and to JROOTS and to United Synagogue, and to all of our partners. I'm speaking very proudly from one of the partner communities, Woodford Forest in Northeast London. Also, a little bit of a personal connection. Normally we'd be spending time with Zach Jaffe right now, so we're delighted to be spending time with him online at least. The amazing thing about the virtual world that we live in is there's no boundaries. The fact that so many communities are coming together for an event such as this, which is one of the silver linings of the recent months, that we've realized that where we are in the world doesn't make a difference. We're one big community, we're one big family. And of course, also it means that instead of listening to a lecture or a talk, which is great with a slideshow, we get this incredible interactive experience to be in the land of Israel, almost as if we're actually there. There's no geographical boundaries either. In the Parsha yesterday, we read a whole list of places that the children of Israel came through, and of course in Israel today it comes to life, each of those places, and we are very fortunate, thanks to technology. We're going to get to taste that tonight, not just a static presentation but a dynamic living presentation. Tonight's presentation, I know, is going to talk about monuments, and thanks to technology, these aren't just stones, these are living, vivid monuments, which is how it should be. A monument can't just be something for the past, but we have to have an eye on the past and an eye on the future. So it seems very appropriate at this time of hope, at this time of the 9 days and the 3 weeks, but also looking forwards to the future, that we have this technology which allows us to experience it ourselves. So I just want to say a huge thank you once again to all those involved in organizing these presentations. We're on Zoom tonight, which means there's a bit more interaction. Tzvi and Zach will be able to see you, see what you're doing. And of course, Thursday, 5 o'clock, the final part. So without further ado, I'll hand you back to Rabbi Eli and say once again, thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the program. Hope you get a lot out of it. I'm sure I will.
Thank you. And with that, we go live to Israel. It's the one and only Tzvi Sperber. Welcome back, Tzvi.
Hi, how are you, everyone? Everyone's okay? It's good to see everyone. Thank you very much for coming back. So last week we dealt with, it was a couple of days ago actually, we dealt with the road to Jerusalem. We spoke about Yotfat, we spoke about Gamla. We talked about the idea of what took place on the roads to Jerusalem, the breaking in and the third wall, and we touched on Beitar at the end. Now we're going to be dealing with another part which deals with the 3 weeks, which is our understanding that we need to remember lots of little things that took place, as well as major things that happened during the 3 weeks. Remember, you know, it's incredible. We have a whole book of Kinot, a whole book of prayers on the 9th of Av, that we sit down and we read. Some of us, usually most synagogues, I'm presuming the United Synagogue too, take a random amount of Kinot, 10, 20, whatever it may be, out of the huge gamut amount of Kinot that we have throughout the year, throughout that day. And we pick out different things. And this is what we try to do as well when we're here now within this presentation that we're going to be seeing now. You know, monuments, well, where do they appear in Judaism? Because we put up a monument, that seems like a bit of a problem, because the Ten Commandments talks about that. And by the way, the first monument that we're going to talk about, which is the menorah at the Knesset, which you'll learn about in a second, there was a big fight over whether or not that monument could be put up, because of the fact that there may be graven images. One of course, the 10 Aseret Hadibot, one of the 10 Commandments that it speaks about. So because of that fight that there was at the time, Rav Herzog got involved and they sorted it out. But we know that there are things which are called a monument. The first time that we have that is what's known as a Gal Ed. A Gal Ed. The Gal Ed, of course, is the famous story of Yaakov and Esav, where they meet in Gilad, which is over the other side of the Jordan in Gilad, by a place called Ma'avar Yabok. We can still see it today. When you travel along the Jordan Valley, you can make out where Ma'avar Yabok is. And Gilad, it's made up of two words, Gal, which is a pile of stones, Ed, that is a witness forever. Ad Hayom Hazeh, until today. That was the type of thing that we had. Stones that we put together, we made a mizbeach, whatever it may be. An altar, that's our type of monument. But we take the word monument, comes under three different names in Israel. One is a galed, one is a yad, like Yad Vashem, I'm sure you're familiar with, and another one is a word called andalta. Andalta actually comes from the Talmud, but it's taken from Greek. It means a gever, a man. Why? Because a monument was either of a person, or of a place, or of something that happened. We've taken all those three together in the state of Israel, and we've started to build for ourselves if you want, our history through monuments. Now, of course, unfortunately, we have lots of monuments along the streets of Israel which deal with traffic accidents. Okay, and we're not going to touch on that today. We know how bad sometimes, unfortunately, the drivers are here. And so we have a lot of traffic accidents. So there are many monuments spotted around Israel. But the monuments which are more famous, of course, are those monuments that deal with the story of the Jewish people, from its inception until today. The first one that we're going to be starting with is the monument which deals with the Menorah HaKnesset. The outside of the Knesset is a menorah. I'm sure that many of you have seen it, but you might not have understood exactly what it's doing there. So hopefully this video, when we went there, will help you understand that. We will be taking questions, by the way, intermittently. Also, the chat is open the whole time. But please, we'll be stopping, and please, 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 interaction. It's great. Okay, so if we can have the first video, that would be fantastic. So we've arrived here at the Menorah HaKnesset, the menorah which stands right outside the Knesset. This menorah itself is an interesting idea. Number one, it's built by a man called Benno Elkin, who comes from England, who is a man who will actually build two big chandeliers in Westminster Abbey. They saw that the government of England, Herbert Samuel's son, then decided that what he wanted to do was to be able to give a gift to the country that had just become a country in 1948. 8 years later, that gift will arrive here. Now, the symbol of the Jewish people, of course, is the Magen David. But that's not the true symbol of the Jewish people. And you'll see time and again in various different monuments, wherever it may be, the menorah is prominent. The menorah goes all the way back, as we know, to that concept from the temple. But if you look at monuments, it will go back to Titus's Arch, which is the most prominent idea on Titus's Arch, than bringing the menorah out of Jerusalem into Rome. And that's the reason why the menorah is going to be picked, coming back to Jerusalem, if you want, from Galut, from exile. The menorah itself, with its 7 branches, different to the Chanukiah, of course, which is we light on Chanukah, but with its 7 branches exactly like the temple describes. And this menorah is very special, because this menorah also describes the history, as Benno Elkin wanted us to understand, of the Jewish people. And there are various different places on this menorah that we can pick out to describe what takes place here. If we look on the right-hand side of the menorah, right at the very top there, we're looking at Yirmiyahu, who is describing the destruction of Jerusalem in the first temple period. But on the other side, if you want, Yirmiyahu of Eicha as well, on 9th of Av. But if we look to the left-hand side, we're describing Isaiah, who describes the concept of Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. Comfort thee, our people. My people will be comforted. We will come back from the Churban, from the destruction of the temple. We have various different depictions throughout here, which are talking about, if you want, major times in our Jewish history, whether it be how we developed ourselves, from the idea of the golden age of Spain, to the development of Kabbalah, to the development of Chassidut, and Halakha, how it evolved throughout the ages, to allow us to be a people that can be self-sufficient, both through how we keep the laws and how we develop the ideas, the philosophical ideas behind what Judaism stands for.
We have all the periods of Jewish history up here as well, whether it be Bar Kokhba rebellion that ended in 135 CE, not far from where we are. We have bang in the middle Moshe with Amalek, fighting the story of Amalek, and Amalek will continue, if you want, to be on our tails the whole time throughout our history. We also have down on the second kaner, down on the second line of the menorah to the right hand side, the second one down, you see a man wrapped up in a Sefer Torah. So Hananiah ben Tadion, who of course is wrapped up by the Romans in a Sefer Torah, and it says, Otiot, Pochot Ba'avir, the letters went up to heaven. All of these things over here are trying to symbolize for us a very important point in how we build our people. On what do we rest? On the Mesirut Nefesh, on the dedication that people made in order that we would be allowed a Jewish history that is the span of what Jewish history stands for today, and that we're all part of. We can all take something from every single thing here and understand what it means. When Ben Arkan came here, he knew there were certain things that there must be on the menorah. Number one, bang in the middle, the second one down, is the Luchot HaBrit, the 10 Commandments, which stand above so many of the arcs we have in any synagogue today. Those 10 sayings, the ethos and the ethics of every society. Below there, we have Ruth, who comes back from Moab, and that idea of Ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim, because you were strangers in a foreign land. You need to know how to look after the strangers. But at the same time, next to her is Rachel, who is talking about the idea that she watched her people going out to Galut, as it says in the prophecy. Kra'ama Hashem, that says God. Mini kolech mi bechi, stop crying. Hold your tears back. Ki yesh schar lepulatech nu'um Hashem, because there is going to be a reward for all of your hard work. V'shavu vanim legvulam, the Jewish people will return to their borders. But they won't come straight away. They'll have to go through the exile before they start to return here. And when you look below there, you can see the big tablet right at the bottom where everything meets. We have there the ghetto of Warsaw and the Mered, the rebellion. In the middle, there is a man who is wearing a Magen David, that other symbol of the Jewish people. And that is Beno Alkin, not who you would expect, which is Mordechai and Levitz, which appears on so many other types of monuments, which is connected, of course, to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the man who was in charge of one of the groups who fought in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, but he puts himself in there as well. A man who fled from Germany to England and was able to make it safely there. And after that, you hear the cries of the people that went out from the Warsaw Ghetto and the people who still to this day, the Jewish national anthem of Shema Yisrael that you see over here. Shema Yisrael. Right at the very bottom of this menorah is the rebuilding of the Jewish people, the prophecy of Rachel that is going through the Shema, through what we fought for, all the way up to making sure that our ethics are exactly the same with the 10 sayings, to where Moshe Rabbeinu brought down those Luchot HaBrit, those 10 commandments down from heaven for us, being able to build a new society here in Israel. When they wanted to be able to put this menorah here, one of the things that Ben Arkin said was it needs to go into the Knesset. At the time when it came to Israel, the Knesset wasn't standing where it is today, the Israeli parliament. It was standing in the center of town. And there was a whole back and forth, can we have such a thing in the Knesset? Because of one of the commandments that would have been on the 10 commandments over here. Lo taseh lecha pesel. You can't make for yourself a graven image. So there were people back and forward, and Rabbi Herzog, who was the chief rabbi at the time, said it's okay, we can do it. He made some changes to make sure that it was hollow, etc. That it wasn't a complete statue. But they didn't put it in the Knesset for lack of room. It never went into this Knesset either. And I think the reason is perfect. One of the reasons they didn't want to put it into the Knesset was because if they knew that it was in the Knesset, you'd have to go through security, and then only a certain amount of people would be able to see it. But today, this is a living memory for all people of Israel to come to, and anyone that comes to Israel, to be able to come here and understand our history and what we rest on to be able to have what we have at the bottom. What are the ways that we have to go through, the journeys that we have to make in order to be able to get to the bottom of this menorah? And it's now the upside down idea. Because usually you have your history as your foundation for everything to rest on. And then you would have at the top, if you want, the rebirth of the Jewish people. Look how the menorah is different. This way, the menorah has the history of the Jewish people, with at the bottom, the rebirth of the Jewish people. We are rebuilding our history, but taking with us throughout all of our lives, all of these elements that we have on the menorah itself today, carrying each and everything with us, knowing that within each part of what all these different depictions that you can see here, close to 30 of them on the menorah, they make up today what the Jewish people are. They make up the people that won't forget who they were, but know how to take what it means to be a Jew from all these ways and build the society that we have today.
The Hasha'ah, the inspiration of the Jewish people, comes from all of our leaders that we had in the past, that we live with and we spend our time with every single day. You open the Tanakh, it's not about a story that once happened, it's about what can I do with that? What do I learn from that? Think about the fact that, even the Rabbi down just spoke about Parshat Shavua, what the portion that we just read last week, the amount of lessons that we can get from every single thing that we do in our lives, from our sources, from our texts, from the people who once said it, from the people who once acted, the way they acted. Musar, learning the way to live, is looking at a person and understanding how he lived his life and how we can then take the messages. Remember, one of the most important sayings that we have in Judaism is this: Maaseh avot siman lebanim. What once happened to our fathers should be a lesson or a reading for each and every one of us. It's an amazing thing. We take his inspiration from the people that laid the path for us. These people who laid the path for us, unfortunately, had to go through a very, very long journey. And that journey was sometimes very hard. And one of the worst parts of that journey, there's no without a doubt, happens to be a calamity that the Jewish people never expected would befall them. We had been through pogroms before. We had had terrible, terrible tragedies. The Churban, the destruction of the first temple, the destruction of the second temple. Can the people rebuild themselves after that? And the answer was probably not, but you didn't know who the Jewish people were. The Jewish people will rebuild themselves because they have that promise from God. And they have that tenacity of what it means to be a Jew. And so they rebuilt themselves. But along comes in 1939, I would say even earlier, in 1933, another enemy. And you can go back even further than that, but we're not going to go into the whole history of the Holocaust now. And all of a sudden, we get hit with another idea. And that idea that we're about to be hit with now is, of course, the Shoah, the Holocaust. Yad Vashem, which was set up in 1954, was meant to be just a monument. It became so much more than that. And of course, that journey that we took at the very beginning, which actually started right now for Jews of Warsaw, as we spoke about last week. Last week was the anniversary of the first trains, the English anniversary, that left towards Treblinka. And we're coming up to the Jewish anniversary of the trains that left Treblinka from Warsaw. Trains were the beginning of the journey. A journey that the Jewish people moved into an abyss, some of the darkest years that they ever experienced. I want to take you now with Zach to Yad Vashem, to the train carriage that's standing over the mountain there.
We are standing here in Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust Museum, Holocaust Memorial, and one of the things about establishing Jewish memory is it's not good enough just to remember tragedies in their generalities, but we try and be specific. We try and think about what is important to remember. And as we stand underneath one of the most powerful monuments here in Yad Vashem, it's the memorial to the deportees. And what it consists of is a train carriage brought from Europe here to Jerusalem, which emerges from Har HaZikaron, from the Mount of Memory upon which Yad Vashem sits, along a train track which comes out over to the valley here of Jerusalem, a train track which is broken off. A carriage which stands about to fall into the abyss, so representative of the fate of those who boarded those train carriages. And when we talk about survivors and victims of the Shoah, one of the common denominators of so many of them is the idea of the train carriage. But what does that mean? It symbolizes the idea of being taken away from home, leaving the place from which they grew up, from where their lives had been established, where their communities had been built, in order to leave to an unknown destination. And the train carriage behind me shows that unknown destination. As we start to engage with various aspects of the tragedy of the Shoah, it's important not to look at the story from the end. Because for those who stepped into a train carriage like this, at that very moment, for them, that was the greatest tragedy, regardless of what it was that was going to happen to them, whether they were going to perish or to survive. The journey in front of them was terrible, but the moment upon the train carriage itself is where we have some of our most harrowing testimonies. On Tisha B'Av of 1942, a train carriage just like this pulls into the station at Treblinka, carrying the first Jews of Warsaw, about to be exterminated in that camp, which is ultimately going to take the lives of close to 900,000 Jews. But the moment of being on the train carriage itself, for those inside, was the moment of destruction, the moment of tragedy in and of itself. A man called Noah Kliger recalls that when he was inside a train just like this, a young boy turns to him and says, "Would you be able to help me? Would you be able to help me say Kaddish for my father? And if you do, I'll share my bread ration with you." Noah Kliger and some of the young men around him oblige. They recite the Kaddish, and afterwards the boy pulls out a loaf of bread from his uniform. He starts to share it, and as they're chewing, Noah Kliger asks him, "When is it that your father passed away, that we're saying Kaddish for him?" The young boy replies to him and says, "It's just now. We're sitting on him." The tragedy within the train carriage and the tragedy to which the train carriage was taking people is the destruction that this monument remembers and pushes us to understand the depth of the destruction which the Jews of Europe faced on train carriages just like this.
You know, the train itself, I think that many of us have stood either by the train in various places around the world where you may have seen the train, whether being Yad Vashem, whether you've been to Washington, whether you've been to the museum in New York, standing there, or in Auschwitz, or other places around the world where there is a train carriage. The train itself leads us to so many stories. I can't really let this night go past. I know that many of you in Southampton and other communities that are watching know Leslie Kleinman and have met Leslie Kleinman. Leslie, unfortunately, is very, very unwell at the moment. He's in hospital, laid up in hospital, and our prayers go out to him. And I will never forget standing on a train carriage with Leslie as he described what it was like to be with his mother and his siblings for the last time. And when he got off the train in the ramp in Auschwitz, what it meant to lose everything in one foul swoop. He was sent one way and the rest of the family was sent another way. You in your community, there are stories that pierce the mind and never leave us. And one of them is from Max Ostro, Alav Shalom. May his soul be a blessing for each and every one of us, who tells us an incredible story of how he was delirious, he was ill. He felt he may have had typhus even on a train that was going to Treblinka. And he describes to us a mincha that takes place on that train, the afternoon service. So it doesn't matter how many kol nidreis on the ilas he stood in since that time, because he managed to jump the train. His father pushed him and his brother out of the train. Doesn't matter how many kol nidreis on the ilah he has ever stood by, nothing will come anywhere close to what it meant to be on that train, to daven mincha, to say the afternoon prayer on that train. Incredible what people were doing. Incredible the amount of effort that was taking place to stay at Selem Elokim, to say an image of God, even within the darkest moments. As they got on that train, they were remembering, unfortunately, their communities that they left behind. You know, so often when we see these pictures of people lining up at their market square from the Holocaust, they were all in their winter cloaks. Even in the summer, even at this time, they wore their winter coats. Maybe they knew they weren't coming back. It's a possibility. But then we go to a place like Belzec, the death camp, and you find one of the most striking finds, which is a whole cabinet there of keys to a house that they locked their doors in the hope that they were going to come home, to come back to what their communities once were, to the beauty of their communities. At the base of Yad Vashem is a place known as the Valley of the Communities, a valley that looks like the map of Europe when you're standing on top of it, and a valley that tells so many stories that we decided to take you in to try and understand. So we're going to enter now into the valley of the destroyed and some of them rebuilt communities. We're in the valley of the communities. You can call it the valley of the destroyed communities or valley of communities that have rebuilt themselves as well. But when you come into the valley of the communities, you are astounded by the silence that is here. In this place over here with the very big stones that depict for us, again, the building of Jerusalem in the time of the Second Temple period, Herodian stones that we know of, and at the same time, the destruction of all of these communities behind us. You're astounded by the silence that is here. On the wall to my right, all the Hasidic communities in the southern part of Poland, and over here, the beautiful culture of Warsaw, and other places that were here, and the lectures that came out from the various different places from all throughout Europe. The places where so much of who we are today is taught to us. Come shouting out of the wall, screaming to us, not to forget what our lives are about. We are not just about engraving a name on a wall. That would be great, very nice for maybe other places. But for us, it's to come to a place like this, with the name on the wall, to remember what the community stood for, what they taught us, what beauty they gave to our world. When you stand in a place like this at the Valley of the Communities, and you look to the top over here, and you see the trees growing out of the cliff sides over here, if you had a drone and we were to fly over the top, you would see it would look like the map of Europe. We see the trees that are depicting for us something else as well. A tzemach, a plant, something that grows out of the ground, something that grows from nothing. When you stand in Poland in various places, I'm always astounded in one place in particular. There's a mass grave in a town called Wollenberg that many of you who are watching this video might have been at. When you go to the mass grave, in the middle of the mass grave is a huge, humongous tree coming straight out of the mass grave. It happens to be the tallest tree that is surrounding that part of that forest down the bottom. Because though they tried to bury us, and we happen to be in the lowest part of Yad Vashem here, out of here, we have our rebirth as well. On these people and these communities' shoulders, we rebuilt what we have today. We carry on their messages. We carry on their lives. We carry on their tunes. We carry on their works. We read their books. We listen to their music. We understand their Torah they taught us. We continue in their footsteps. These are not just names on the walls for us. These are messages shouting out to us.
Al na tishkachein, don't forget me. Remember who we are and remember what we stood for.
If you were to visit the city of Rome in the 1930s, you'd meet members of the Spizzichino family, in particular Settimia, a young girl living amongst one of the oldest continuous Jewish communities in the whole of Europe. Even before the destruction of the temple by the Romans, there were Jews living here in the city of Rome. And for them, Tisha B'Av, the destruction, was something which was very close to home. They were sitting under the noses of those who destroyed Jerusalem. And Settimia, together with her family, would have attended the synagogue on the 9th of Av and sat together as a family, surrounding a candle, reading the Megillah Avecha, the scroll of Lamentations, telling the story of the destruction, which pretty much was the reason that they were living there in Rome. Each year, 4 months later, that same candle would be taken eventually as the first candle of the first night of Hanukkah. And for the Jews of Rome, destruction very much seemed something of the past. But come October the 16th, 1943, Settimia, together with 1,258 other Jews from the Jewish area, from the Jewish ghetto, were removed from their homes by the Nazis. They were walked through the same streets that their ancestors had been walked through by the Romans, and they were deported. 2 days later, Settimia's transport arrived in Auschwitz. She suffered at the hands of the Nazis in Auschwitz, at the hands of Mengele and his medical experiments. She suffered the death marches, and eventually on her 24th birthday in 1945, she was liberated. She came back to Rome, one of only 16 from 1,259 who had left, who managed to survive. Destruction was once again the watchword for Roman Jewry, an attempt to wipe out, after 2,000 years, the same people who had been brought there. Settimia didn't allow herself to fall into the abyss. Instead, she dedicated herself to teaching, to educating, to rebuilding, to trying to restart a community of Jews which had been there for close to 2,000 years. And it's here that we remember the Jews of Rome of then, the Jews of Rome of now, and the tragedy which befell them.
We're about to see footage now of the people of Munkach.
We're in the Valley of the Communities, and you might be able to see all these small little names on the wall, and then a big name over here. Around all of these small names, which are the villages that surrounded the big town. The big town was in the Subcarpathian Mountains, which was known as Munkach. Munkach, which traversed between various different countries over the years. We have records of Jews being there from the 17th century, the middle of the 1600s. When the Jews arrived there, they don't really settle majorly, but they will become up to 13,000 Jews. Over 40% of the town will be Jewish pre-war. I'm standing here today in the middle of the 3 weeks, and what we're about to do is to read on the 9th of Av, of course, Eicha, the Book of Lamentations. This is what one of the survivors wrote after going back to Munkach. I walk along the streets of the town with the melody of Eicha, the melody of the Book of Lamentations, caught in my throat. Where was our generous, simple, charitable, pure and sweet Munkach? God forbid, don't think that you're going and seeing it in the eyes of the people. Today, the eyes of the people are very different. Seal the memory of what Munkach was in your soul, as she once was. Be satiated by her for the rest of your life. For there is nothing like this and like her in the whole world. A town that holds within her all the prophets, all the Tanaim, all the Amoraim, all the Gaonim, the people who wrote the Mishnah, the people who wrote the Gemara, and the people who were involved in the development of Halakha afterwards.
Munkach has in it the Ramban and the Ramban, Rashi and the Vilna Gaon, and the Tanya of Chabad, up until those who ascend to Zion today. Give me the lobes of Munkach, and I will kiss the edges of the Bekesha of the Hasidic Shabbos robe. Eicha Yoshva Badad, how a city sits all alone. That's Munkach of today. But it wasn't Munkach of then. Munkach, as we said, huge Jewish community, over 40,000 Jews that were in the town itself. A community that had a very, very big Hasidic presence, and a community that was very big in the Zionist world as well. But a community that will fall, as I said, between various different countries. And come 1944, March of 1944, when the Germans will invade Hungary and take upon itself as well this whole area that you see here. And Munkach, that will be the festival of Pesach. The last time the Jews are going to sit in their homes in Munkach is Pesach. Some of them will sit there just for the Seder. Some will be there till the end of Pesach. But the end of Pesach, when they give the order for all the Jews to leave their homes and to head into one of the 11 brick factories that were surrounding Munkach, which they used as ghettos, which the Jews of Hungary had lived in relative safety until 1944, didn't know about. That was the time when they had to make decisions what they were going to take. Then you have to go back to the depiction that we just said. All of the great works of Judaism that lived in Munkach, even though they physically didn't live there, but they were learned there. We have depictions of people hugging their bookcases, knowing they couldn't take them with you. What do you take in a suitcase for the family? What do you take? One of those people who arrive in Munkach are going to tell us. They took a couple of the books, their tefillin, food, which was essential because nobody knew what was going to happen. And then you see the same pictures that we see coming through the whole story of the Holocaust. March is still a little chilly, but we're talking about now April, when they're going into the ghetto. We moved into spring. But as you see from the pictures of when Hungarian Jewry arrived to Auschwitz in May, what are they wearing? At least what were they wearing when they got on the trains? Many of them disrobed because of the heat in the trains. But they put on their winter clothes. They put on their winter clothes not knowing what was going to happen to them, not knowing how long they were going to be there. The Jews of Munkach will be shipped out in May. Before that, they would have spent time in a ghetto that had appalling conditions as well. And though we are overshadowed by those ghettos of Poland, which lasted for a number of years, what does it mean to live in a ghetto for a day? What does it mean to have the uncertainty of having no food on your table for one day? What does it mean to not have shelter for one day? Munkach, though, gives us that hope. Because as you see at the video in this end of this presentation, look at the little children of Munkach. Look at what they sang. They sang about the hope. They sang about the new world that will take place and will be built in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Those beautiful kinderlich, those beautiful children, who give us that hope even with the darkness of what was taking place in Munkach. What a glorious community that all we can say now is Eicha Yashva Badat, how it sits all alone. The part at the end of it is a very famous recording that we have, which is the recording which is of the children of Munkach who sang Hatikva. We have them on video, okay, on a film, singing Hatikva in the late 30s, beginning of 40s. Incredible, okay? Remember, the words of Hatikva were very different to this. Are there any questions before we carry on? Because we want to do at least one more place, if possible. Any questions? Please don't be shy to ask. Otherwise, we'll just move on to the next spot. Rabbi Levine?
Yes, we do have a question from Floris. Please unmute yourself and go for it. Floris, we're sorry, we can't hear you yet. You're still muted.
Can you give me the name again? Ben Alkin or something, the architect who designed the menorah?
Yeah, his name's Ben Elkin.
Can you say it again?
Elkin.
Elkin, I thought it was. I thought you said something else. Thank you. Elkin. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Brilliant, beautiful. Always love to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for your Yerushalayim. Okay.
Anybody else?
We're one of those places that many people don't go to is what's now on your screen, at least a picture of. This is known as Megillat Ha'esh. I think that many of you are very familiar with the place, the Warsaw Ghetto Square in Yad Vashem. And of course, if you've been to Warsaw, you'd be very familiar with Warsaw, with the Warsaw Ghetto monument that stands there. All of this was built by a man called Nathan Rappaport. Now, Nathan Rappaport's a very interesting figure. Nathan Rappaport, by the way, grew up in Warsaw in 1911, I think he was born. He dies in the 70s. And Nathan Rappaport, what happens to him is he goes to art school. He doesn't manage to get into the art part, but they say to him, listen, we've got some room for you if you want to take up to be a sculptor. Excuse me. And he decides to do that, and he goes into that field. People are very impressed by what he does. He goes off to Paris, and he comes back to Poland before the war. Realizes what's happened to him, and he does what happens to a lot of Jews from Warsaw and many other places. They flee to the east, to the Russian side, banking on the idea that it's going to be easier with the Russians than it is going to be under the Germans, under the Germans. When he gets very far into Russia, they realize who this man is as well, and they make sure that he starts to make monuments for them, but to do with communism, Stalin, other things like that. He does all of that, but at the end of the war, he comes back to Warsaw. Now, this is the most incredible thing, because Warsaw is standing in complete ruins. Remember, 1943, Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. They destroy so much of Warsaw. 1944, 1 year later, the Poles realize, hold on a second, if that band of Jews could do that, surely we could do something too. And they have their rebellion in the summer of 1944. The Germans decide to destroy the city. Even though the Russians are waiting on the other side, they destroy the city. Over 90% of Warsaw is destroyed. The Russians come in, they destroy lots more, and of course they build their communist housing and all sorts of other buildings. Warsaw sits in complete ruins. Rappaport comes to the mayor of Warsaw and demands from him a place to be able to build a monument to the Warsaw Ghetto, to those Jews that were taken off to Treblinka, and to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. He gets a place, and there's a whole other story behind the monument too. He will come to Israel, and he will build a copy of that. It will be stuck in storage, by the way, in Yad Vashem. They won't take it out for years, until finally they put it in the Warsaw Ghetto Square. He'll build in Kibbutz Yad Mordechai, a famous monument of Mordechai Nilevitz, who of course was the main fighter in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising of the Zobot movement. He will also build in Kibbutz Negba, where he will finally live, and many other places around Israel, New York, Paris, and other places. But he'll die in New York in the 70s, as we said. One of, if you want, the most important monuments that this man ever made, even according to him, is the one you're about to see now. This is known as Megillat Ha'esh, which is outside of Jerusalem in a place called Ner Ramat Raziel, for those of you that are familiar, on the back road, beautiful back road, past Kibbutz Suba, which some of you may have taken either your kids or grandchildren to go jumping on the bouncy castles there. Okay, and then further down the hill is Megillat Ha'esh, which you're about to see now. Unfortunately, because of the amount of material there is here, it's a bit of a longer clip, but if you stay with it, you'll understand what he wanted, Rappaport. Because this is going to be the only one where he's not going to just deal with the past. Let's have a look at the video and try and understand, and the messages that come out of there for us in the 3 weeks that we're sitting in now?
In order for us to understand it, though, you need to come inside of the monument with me. Because the story is about to be told now, which is the story of the Jewish people from the time of when the Germans will walk into Poland on September the 1st of 1939 and onwards. If you come in here now and you look up, you will see the concept of what they've built here. The idea that we have the sky, which is open, but walls surround us. And these walls that surround us are meant to be the ghetto. The idea that we're trapped inside the ghetto, and the only thing that we had was the idea that we could still see the sky outside. We were always able to see that. We were always able to have that hope. We were always able, if you want, the communication lines were always open. And that we ourselves could have at least that idea and be optimistic that something could change. But come 1942, the summer of 1942, what changes is something that the Jewish people never dreamed could ever happen. We've been through many calamities in our lives, and we've been through many tragedies. Pogroms is a word that we all carry in our back pocket. The Jewish people have lived in their suitcase for 2,000 years. But did we ever believe that it was going to get to the way that the Germans built what they were about to build? Concentration camps, labor camps, and of course the famed death camps. Warsaw has its famed death camp that's awaiting it as well, which is Treblinka. Summer of 1942. Nobody will forget, whether you've read about it or those people who are watching who unfortunately witnessed it, can never forget what took place. When the decree came down and befell the Jewish people, that 6,000 to 10,000 Jews every day were going to be gathered within what's known as the Umschlagplatz to be taken away to their death. And the Jews will start their journey. One of the most momentous occasions that takes place within the Warsaw Ghetto at that time is without a doubt the famous march of Janusz Korczak. Janusz Korczak, who was known as Henryk Goldschmidt. Janusz Korczak, who this man over here, and you can see, and you'll never see a picture of Janusz Korczak without him holding a child. As you see over here, him marked in here, will march with his orphanage across the ghetto. People will note that they will watch the Jewish police even salute him. Because it was such a moving moment to see how Janusz Korczak had dressed up his children in their Shabbat finery, singing a song as if they're about to go off to a summer holiday. Optimism, the idea of the sky, once again, that he's giving to his kids. And as Janusz Korczak gets to the Umschlagplatz, and as he's about to get on the train, the Germans say, you do not need to go. You don't need to go, Janusz Korczak. You, Henryk Goldschmidt, which was the original name, you don't need to go. But Janusz Korczak then says, do my children need to go? If my children need to get on the wagon, then I need to get on the wagon. What a symbol of leadership. The Warsaw Ghetto is going to be marked with unbelievable parts of leadership. And for that, we have to span out to be able to understand what's taking place. 42, we have the leading of people. And you can see over here, if the camera can, again, coming close, you can see the flag that's here. The flag of the kids who are marching. Those flags are going to be prominent as well through here. We watch as well how the German soldiers are going to lead them with their bayonets that you see over here. But the next stage that will take place will be, of course, the rebellion that takes place over here. And how the flag that you see right at the very top, if it can be made out of a person climbing a ladder, flags over the Warsaw Ghetto by Moshe Aarons, the flag that we know that the Bundes put up, the flag that we know, the flags of Israel, that a woman jumps from rooftop to rooftop to be able to put up, to be able to keep that pride of what it means to be a Jew, even under the most extreme circumstances. And as you see what's happening around you, the ghetto is going up in flames. The buildings are going up, and people are jumping for their lives, trying to save themselves. But all the while, those people are still fighting whether they're going to lose their lives or be taken off to the camps. The next stage that we see in his incredible monument is this over here. How the Jews, with their arms up, their arms even at some stage, I don't know whether it's clapping or grasping onto something. It's hard for us to tell, but there's poetic license here. And you can see again what he has, just like in his Warsaw Ghetto Memorial. If you remember, there he's got people standing who are fighting in the rebellion and a person that has died. A person that has been, unfortunately, not managed to make it. Here again, we have people who have not managed to make it, and other stories that we know of all sorts of things that we have. They're marching out, but they are not, if you want, going easily. They are not just saying, take me away. The kid at the bottom over here who looks back, again connecting us to a past monument, but the kid who deals with this idea of there's a whole world out there I still want to be part of. Don't take away my childhood. Don't take away who I am, what I could become. Don't push me into the abyss that I'm heading into. You see the flames everywhere, and if we can take a step back as well, and we look at the vast expanse over here, right at the very top over there, you will start to see a motif which is connecting us very much to the whole of the monument. You can see the branches of the menorah, which are up to our left-hand side over there, where we're reminding ourselves of Titus's arch. We're reminding ourselves of the menorah, okay, from that time period. It's going to come back again and again as we look at this monument. Soldiers marching the people now from the trains to the camps. The fences that we see here with the barbed wire that we notice over here of the camps. Mothers and fathers for the last time standing together. How many of us have heard the stories of Mengele who decided whether or not a person should die or live? How many of us have heard heart-wrenching stories of this is the last time they saw each other? We see the last kiss, the last embrace, the last bracha, blessing that a father's going to give his son, and vice versa. When you stand here and you look at this, you can't not be moved to tears by what you see. Of a father and son standing together, embracing. Their whole world is about to be shattered. One side is the one part of the family, the other side is the other part of the family, as we see over here as well. And then we talk about the difference here between what took place. And if you want, when I look at this, even though there were so many camps, what Rappaport's managed to do is to embrace the idea here of everything together. A concentration camp, a labor camp like you can see behind me, and a death camp. What do we call that? We call that Auschwitz. Auschwitz was all three together, one after the other. You had the labor, you had the concentration, and you had the death camp here. All three of them that were here. You can see the barbed wire and the fences over here, and you start to see the flames going up over here. The flames that are taking the people into the crematoria. Remember, you work for 3 months, and then you're worth nothing. And you go to the crematoria as well. It's all connected to that point over here. But there will be a time when the people will finally be liberated. From the summer of 1944, liberation will start to take place, whether it be in Majdanek in 1944, or of course, January the 27th, 1945, which will be Auschwitz. There are all different types of ideas that are taking place here, whether it's the death marches that you see over here, to the people that are starting to make their way over here, and the liberators coming in. And then you see this mangled mass at the bottom over here. Bodies upon bodies upon bodies. One on top of the other. And all you need to do is imagine that tractor that comes in Bergen-Belsen with the famous film that you can still see the footage in Yad Vashem, or you can see it on various different ways of seeing it through videos or whatever else, of the bodies being pushed into the mass graves that were in Bergen-Belsen again. The only real place where they took that footage. But it affects him as well, Rappaport, when he sees it. We come up now, people carrying the sorrow, They've lost their families, new lives gathering together. Person with all his belongings in one suitcase. You can see, unfortunately, it's got a white mark down it. And look at that, back on this little kid's head. What does he have? He has his kippah back on. Over here, on the little head over here. You'll notice as you go up now beyond the white, you'll see there's a mother and a daughter. If you want reuniting, we know so often when we hear about stories of houses that were set up in various different places for people to be able to go and find the list, to see if a relative was there. And we can see the reuniting of a family. And then we see a man bowing down, if you want. But look what Rappaport has put on his arm. He's put the tefillin back on his arm. Above there, you see the people getting on the boats. And you see the Israelis of that time starting to help them. Because now we jump from this roll, or this Megillah, to this Megillah. At the very top, with Kibbutz Negba accepting the new people. And people now moving from the shores, jumping off and being helped by the Jews of Israel at the time. The Kovatembel, the Kibbutznik at the time. And turning now into becoming Israelis to rebuild the new state. And you see how the person that was round there now becomes this. We have here again a new life. People finding once again that possibility to love once again. The famous story that we have from France, when in one of these reconvalescent houses, where the kids didn't know how to cry, how to laugh, nothing. They knew nothing about that. But once again, here they start to learn how to love again. Husband meets wife for the first time again. But they all know now what they need to do. And that is to make sure that they build their land, they replant their plants, they bring back the 7 species that you see over here. And it's a motif that goes around, okay, in various different places. Till we get to the next spot over here, which is now the fight to be able to hold on to Yerushalayim. In 1948, Israel manages to be able to get back the area that we're standing in. But in 1967, they're going to want to get back to the heart. Remember, we lost it for 19 years. Now give me the heart. And the heart is Yerushalayim. Within the 6-Day War, of course, we managed to be able to capture Yerushalayim. And then we see the most incredible visions as the menorah of Titus comes back to Yerushalayim. Look at it. It's exactly the same one that's on the Titus's arch. That base that was built in order to take the menorah to Rome. That's the base that we see coming back. Look at the hat of the man who's carrying it, even though he wasn't there at the time. It's Rav Goren's famous hat. If you look down here as well, he's draped, if you want, in a talit at the time. Soldier helping soldier after the battles that took place, wherever it may be. Helping them after Givat HaTachmoshe, Ammunition Hill, and all these other ones that were on their way to be able to bring back and place the flag, as you see over here, over Temple Mount. You see the Chatzotzra, the trumpet being blown, as if to say the Jewish people have returned back, and the horror at the top. Look at the horror, the dance that takes place at the top. You have everybody mixed together. The Chassid, the soldier, the Kibbutznik, all of them together, dancing together in one place. You see the shofar being blown. And then you see over here as well, a man looking through binoculars with one eye, depicting, of course, Moshe Dayan, who's over here. We see over here as well this idea of the glima, of a raincoat. The raincoat, what's it doing here? It doesn't mean there should be a raincoat. It's the middle of the spring, summer nearly, when they captured Jerusalem. But he puts it here as if it's a talit as well. La'atof, to be able to wrap the Jewish people up together. You'll notice as well, as you look at the different helmets, what's on the depiction of the helmets. There are different things. If you look at this one over here, I know it's hard to see and hard to make out, but he's got olive branches here. These are olive branches. Why? Olive is the symbol of peace. Until we get to this, to understand everything that he's been trying to tell us, that it doesn't matter how much we had to sacrifice to be able to get back Yerushalayim. And to be able to stand here by the wall, look at the soldiers who had fought the battle, now standing by the Kotel, putting on their tefillin again here at the Kotel at Yerushalayim, as we can see over here. And then we see this. There is a pipe going up, if you want a mott, a branch, if you want, going all the way up in the middle, where two different types of people are holding. On one side, you see the fighters holding, those that have managed to recapture Yerushalayim. And on the other, you see those who perished, whether being from the right-hand side of the model, the Kotel, the area of the Shoah, or those that died to be able to recapture Yerushalayim. And when you head back in, you head back into something else. And this is what you head back into. The Nevuah of the dry bones. Krama Hashem Elokim, thus says God, Hinei ani patachet kifrotechem, I am opening up your graves for you, and I'm taking you out from the graves, and I'm going to bring you to the land of Israel. And I'm going to put my spirit into you, and you're going to resettle this place and resettle this land. Has not happened. Tisha B'Av is about destruction. But you can't forget what comes out the other side. It's the rebuilding of the people. We've said it time and again. But a strong people is a people, an eternal people is a strong people. A people that never gives up. A people that will continue to walk. A people that will continue to march. Chuck at us what you want. We're coming back. But we will never forget what takes place. The Megillah of the Shoah to the Megillah of the Geula. The Megillah of Holocaust to the Megillah of redemption. God willing that this should be the last Tisha B'Av that we have to be together. And that it should turn into a day of simcha v'sason, of happiness and joy.
There's so much more that we could speak about, and maybe I'll just finish off by saying this before I think Rabbi Golka is going to speak, and that's this. Firstly, once again, I want to thank all the partners for allowing us to be able to show a little bit of a glimpse of Israel and things that will allow us to have this introspection of what it means to be sitting today, now, in what we call Shavua Shechal Bo, in the week of the 9th of Av. The 9th of Av, of course, we talk about the idea that the destruction of the temple, at least the second temple, was because of sinat chinam, because of senseless and baseless hatred between each other. And I think there's a beautiful idea that came out from a number of things that we did today as well with the monuments, and that's this. In the last week's parsha, it said as follows, that Moshe Rabbeinu says, it's too heavy for me to carry the people any longer. I can't carry them anymore. And when he carries on, he says, why? Because they've grown k'chochvei hashamayim, like the stars of the sky. There are only two ways that the Jewish people are compared to. Either the stars of the sky or the dust of the earth. And the reason that Moshe said the stars of the sky is this. Dust sticks together. The dust particles are attracted to one another. And they become like one gush, like one big ball. A kochav stands by itself. A star stands by itself. The 9 days is about, unfortunately, that we're still kochavei hashamayim. We all stand individually. It might be very bright, but if it would have been a very different story, had we been able to understand that we were like afar haaretz, like the idea that we're one group together that's attached to each other, maybe we would have been able to change history a little bit more. We're running in towards those 4 days now that are left before Tisha B'Av. And I'm going to hand over to Rabbi Golka to speak about it. But I really would love to see as many of you as possible on the live presentation that we're going to be doing together on Tisha B'Av from Jerusalem, from Yerushalayim HaKodesh, with the Amen singers that are going to be accompanying us as well, trying to lift our souls on those last few hours of the fast together as we walk through Yerushalayim. Remember, Tisha B'Av is not the end. Tisha B'Av is the beginning of a new parsha, the new part of our history. It's opening a new chapter into our life. It's understanding that we can be those dust particles, and we don't just need to be those stars. So I'm going to hand over to Rabbi Levine, and thank you very much for this evening and giving us the opportunity to do this.
Thank you. I'm handing over to Rabbi Golka. You're on mute, Rabbi.
There we go.
Though I can't
First of
hear
all, can I please say a huge thanks, first and foremost, to Rabbi Eli Levine for overseeing this entire program, and a very special thank you to Tzvi and Zach from JROOTS for putting on this extraordinary learning experience. Here we are, sitting in the comfort of our own homes, people all over the world coming together to Israel to take these footsteps. It's just mind-blowing, and it reminds me of a beautiful Chovetz Chaim al Torah. The Chovetz Chaim says a beautiful idea that when Moses reached the burning bush, he's told to remove his shoes. And the Pasuk says that he's told to take off his shoes because the land on which you are standing is holy. And the commentators, the Chovetz Chaim says, what does it mean, the land on which you are standing? It means that it should have said the land on which you stood in the past tense. But no, the Chovetz Chaim says in the present tense. Because any time, any place, a person can connect with the Almighty. And I think this has been brought to life tonight. We can connect with something which is really the most difficult time in the Jewish calendar to really tap into. I certainly feel that Tzvi, you and Zach and your team have prepared us for the Shavua Shachalbo, the week of Tisha B'Av. And you know, the Maharsha says on his commentary in Brachot, very briefly, that the 3 weeks has 21 days, then Bein HaMatzarim. And there are also 21 days from Rosh Hashanah to Hoshana Rabbah. And just like the 21 days of Tishri are days of purification, where we do Teshuvah, we purify ourselves and we connect, so too, the days of Bein HaMatzarim of the 3 weeks, they're also days of purification, but purification through learning about the suffering of our ancestors. And I must tell you, I'm really, in a very strange way, looking forward to Tisha B'Av afternoon to learn really in a very interactive way. Tzvi's going to be on the road. He's going to be going to Jerusalem, and it's going to be an audio-visual experience with our main singers, where we're going to be going live at 5 p.m. on Tisha B'Av afternoon, live on US TV. And I hope each and every one of you will join us. And perhaps, Tzvi, you could tell us a little bit more about what's going to be happening on Tisha B'Av afternoon. Can I also, before you do tell us, say a big thank you to Mike from Galaxy. You've really done an amazing job putting this together. That's Mike Kelly of Galaxy Video. And now perhaps, Tzvi, you could tell us a little bit about what to expect on Thursday afternoon. And of course, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them now as well.
Great. So I'll just tell you what's happening on Tisha B'Av. Thank you very much, Rabbi Golka. Good to see you. What we're going to be doing on Tisha B'Av is we're going to be heading from First Temple to Second Temple. We're going to be starting from outside of the Old City, at one of the gates of the Old City, heading through towards the City of David. We're going to be trying to go under one of those tunnels which run all the way under the City of David, under the Old City walls of today, okay, into where the southern wall starts, coming out to where the Chulda gates were, where, of course, the entrance to the Bet HaMikdash was, and ending off with a viewpoint over Har HaBayit, to link us all together to understand what it means to be one people, standing in one place, always praying towards the same direction, always playing to that place that we call Hamakom. Hamakom. Okay, the place that Kodesh Baruch Hu chose, the place where heaven kisses earth, the place where Yerushalayim Shamala meets Yerushalayim Shamata. Heavenly Jerusalem meets earthly Jerusalem. That's what we're going to try and do. And again, it's going to be very beautiful, accompanied with the Amen singers that are going to be able to lift our souls and lift our spirits. And we'll be able to sing with them on that day with the yearnings for Jerusalem. And it's this year more than anything else. You've got the physical yearning as well of not being able to come back. Many people, I'm sure, planned their summer holidays to be in Israel this year. And you haven't managed to do that. And we are looking forward to those days where we can welcome you back, post-COVID, okay, to Eretz Yisrael and back home to the land of Israel. If there are any questions, please, I would love to help, love to answer questions if there are any questions.
That's a question. First of all, I sent you a text. I love you to hear you and see you today. And whoever would have thought that we would have accompanied you at last on the Israel tour somewhat. Please put in a nutshell the difference of Israel as a homeland as envisaged by Herzl, in the early 19th century, 1896, that was the whole raison d'etre for a Jewish national home. And the existence of Israel is premised on the Holocaust as a refuge, as you've explained so movingly tonight. Are they different Israels? Are they different Israels for you? Do you think differently about those two Israels?
If I understood the question correctly, because it was a little hard to hear, you were mentioning about the Israel of Herzl, I think, to the Israel of today, whether I feel there's a different type of Israel. Is that correct? So, okay.
Not so much Israel of today, but the Israel premised on the Holocaust.
So, yeah, there's no doubt about it that Israel was built on the shoulders of those people from the Holocaust, okay? And that doesn't take away, God forbid, from anything that the people who came from outside Mizrach, the places like Iraq, Iran, Morocco, and everywhere else that came. But the first people that are going to arrive back to those shores, okay, before the incoming of the exiles from the Arab lands, is definitely going to be those survivors of the Holocaust. And they're going to have a completely different vision, maybe, than what Herzl's vision was at the time as well. You see that, by the way, from Nathan Rappaport. It's amazing. When you look at Nathan Rappaport, he's not a religious person at all. At all. But in the last the monument that you saw, which is Megillah HaEsh, you see constantly, again, it's hard for you to see because it was a video that was hard to see. You have to stand really very closely there. There are menorot everywhere, all over. There are people twice or three times, wearing tefillin. Not what you would expect from the chalutzim that came at the beginning, those that wanted to get rid of that side of, if you want. There are people wearing their kippot. There's a person with tzitzit. You see all these types of motifs of religious Judaism coming out. He's not afraid to show up going with the Sefer Torah. He's not afraid to show all these types of things because he realized that all makes up the picture of what Israel is. It's not what it once was where, if you want, in Alt Neuland of Herzl, where he wrote that book called Old New Land, where he spoke about this idea of a land where we will leave behind everything that we once knew and we will rebuild ourselves, really leaving behind as well Judaism behind there. That's not what Rappaport's saying. Rappaport is not forgetting what his Warsaw was. If you ever want to see something very, very touching, beautiful, very deep, if you listen to Rav Soloveitchik has an incredible video on the Seder Avodah, on the part of Tefillah which the Kohen HaGadol described in Musaf. I don't know what's happening in shuls this year. I hope that people will be in shul. Okay, but Musaf in Yom Kippur, where the Seder Avodah is described. And Rav Soloveitchik describes standing in Warsaw next to his father in Seder Avodah and his grandfather. And he describes not being in Warsaw, but actually standing in the Bet HaMikdash. That's what it felt to him. When Rappaport is making his monument, he is depicting for us that beauty of the Jewish life that was before as well. And he wants to bring all that beauty back, even though he himself might not hold on to it, but he wants to hold on, he wants the Jewish world to hold on to it. He might have these, if you want, cheshbonot, these accounts that he has with God for whatever took place, but he desperately wants us to understand that chain we are all part of. And we have to hold on to that link in the chain. Somebody has to do it for us. Otherwise, it will all crumble. And I think it's a very beautiful and touching thing that he does on that monument. Is there any other questions that I can help with? JROOTS does do tours of Israel. Yes, plenty of them. I can see there's a question that came up on the chat. Yeah, we do tours everywhere, as you know, but certainly in Israel. That was where I started my whole guiding career, if you want, and educating was certainly in Israel. I ran the tour guide course in Israel as well. So yes, we do it. We're willing, more than happy next time you come back. Anything else? Okay, Rabbi Levine.
Thank you, everybody, and see you back for Tisha B'Av, God willing. Be well and good night.